Back when I was in college, I took a summer job as the arts and crafts lead at this all-girls camp tucked way out in the hills, about 45 minutes outside my hometown. It wasn't a random gig either. I had gone there as a camper growing up and absolutely loved the place, so getting to come back and work there felt like coming full circle. The camp was spread out across a big wooded area with thick trees, a winding creek, and a ridge that gave you a view of almost the whole camp if you climbed high enough. There were no road signs or markers leading to it, and unless you knew it was there, you'd never stumble across it. Honestly, that isolation was part of the charm. You just felt cut off from the outside world in the best possible way. Since I ran the crafts program, I had my own little cabin that doubled as the art studio. It was up near the ridge, which made for gorgeous views, but also meant it was a bit out of the way. I spent a lot of late nights up there, mostly because we had a kiln, and I never trusted it to run without someone nearby. I'd sit outside or inside with the windows open, usually just enjoying the quiet. Everyone at camp would pull silly pranks, especially the other counselors, so I didn't pay much attention to random taps on the windows or stones hitting the roof. That stuff happened all the time and was usually followed by giggles or someone running off. But then the flowers started showing up. They were these little bunches, wildflowers, sometimes tied together with string or a hairband, left outside the craft cabin, by the door, even on the potting wheel. At first, I thought maybe one of the campers was being sweet. I tried to encourage them by talking about how nice it was that someone would leave flowers, thinking whoever it was would feel appreciated. A few times, I even found them inside the building, which I brushed off because I left the place unlocked. We had bathrooms in there, and it wasn't unusual for girls or other counselors to come in at night if they needed something. It all seemed innocent, maybe even cute, until it wasn't. One night, about 2 weeks into flower gifting season, I was up late with the kiln running and heard tapping on the back window. I didn't even look up at first, just yelled something about releasing spiders into people's beds if they didn't knock it off. But then, I heard laughter. Not the bubbly, teasing kind I was used to. It was deeper, slower, and wrong in a way I couldn't quite explain. I looked over and saw eyes, just a pair of eyes peering through the glass. I grabbed the walking staff we all carried for snakes and ran out after whoever it was, catching only the shape of someone disappearing into the brush behind the cabin. That was the first moment I realized I might have been dealing with something entirely different. I tried to stay logical. I thought maybe it was just someone playing an elaborate joke. Maybe one of the older campers or even another counselor. Still, I woke up the camp director and told her what happened. She wasn't happy with me, and neither was the caretaker who got dragged out of bed. But they helped search around anyway. We didn't find anything, and the next morning I was basically the camp weirdo. I wanted to let it go, but the feeling that someone had been watching me didn't fade. The flowers stopped for a bit, and I started convincing myself that I was just exhausted. But during the final week of camp, they started popping up again, and this time, it wasn't just 1 or 2 bunches. I found them everywhere. Outside my sleeping cabin, inside the craft house, even near the showers I used. I started tossing them in the trash without even thinking, trying not to let it get to me. But something about the way they were appearing now, so many, all over, made me feel like I was being messed with on purpose. Then came the last day. The campers were scheduled to head home that afternoon, and I was wrapping things up, ready to go home and sleep for a week straight. That morning, I found the biggest bouquet yet sitting right in front of the craft house door, and I didn't hesitate. I threw it straight into the trash, slammed the lid shut, and walked off. Later that evening, I went back to the craft house to clean up a bit, and as soon as I opened the door, I froze. There, coiled in the middle of the floor, was a massive rattlesnake, and it was not happy. I closed the door fast and turned to go get help, assuming someone must have left the side door open and the thing slithered in. But then I felt something, like that electric buzz of knowing someone's eyes are locked on you. My arms broke out in goosebumps, and I turned around, not sure what I was expecting. Up on the ridge, silhouetted against the setting sun, stood a man, just standing there, completely still. And then he started laughing. Not just a chuckle either. It was loud, mocking, like he was proud of himself. He called down and asked me if I liked his gift. That was it. I ran like hell straight to the director's cabin. She didn't question me this time. The police were called, the area was searched, and just like before, nothing. No sign of the guy, no tracks, no explanation. Only that furious rattlesnake still trapped inside the craft house. That night, we all packed up and left. Normally, we stayed for a few extra days to do cleanup and shut everything down properly for the season, but nobody wanted to stick around after that. I never went back. The camp shut down not long after, though I heard the land is still used for occasional group events. As for me, I never figured out who that man was or what his deal was with me. I just know I don't trust the woods the way I used to. Growing up, I had this one friend, Zach, who practically had a second home, his place. His family was the kind that always had music playing, the fridge stocked, and people coming and going like it was a community center. I'd crash there so often during summer breaks that his mom eventually just started referring to me as her other son. But the real reason I loved being there so much? His older brother, Jake. Jake was 5 years older, and to us, he was this cool, untouchable force. He had long hair, played guitar, wore band tees of groups I hadn't even heard of yet, and always smelled like campfire and cologne. When Jake talked, we listened like he was reading scripture. That summer, when I was 13, Jake went off to some adventure camp that involved kayaking, hiking, ziplining, basically every fun thing that didn't exist in our boring little town. While he was gone, the vibe at Zach's place was different. Not bad, just quieter, less electric. We were still doing our usual stuff, riding bikes, watching movies we probably shouldn't have been watching. But we both kept talking about how jealous we were of Jake's trip, and how we were totally signing up for that camp when we were old enough. Finally, Jake's return day came. Zach's dad went to pick him up, and the moment we heard the car pull into the driveway, we ran to the door like it was Christmas morning. His dad walked in alone, teary-eyed, voice cracking, and he goes, "He didn't make it. I'm so sorry, boys." Our knees damn near gave out. And then, right behind him, Jake steps in and says, "You guys are too easy," laughing his head off like it was the funniest thing ever. We didn't think it was funny at all, but we couldn't stay mad for long. That night, we stayed up late listening to all of Jake's camp stories, how he almost flipped out of a raft, lost a boot to a river, and snuck into the girls' cabin with a friend just to leave a frog in someone's bed. Total chaos, and we were hanging on every word. Eventually, we all crashed. I woke up a few hours later, sweating and breathing hard because of this weird dream I had. Everything about that day had replayed exactly as it happened, except in the dream, Jake really hadn't made it back. I still remember how real it felt, and the way my heart pounded even after waking up. I got up to get some water and clear my head. The house was dark, except for a bit of moonlight coming through the front windows. As I walked through the den toward the kitchen, something caught my eye in the living room. For a second, I thought I saw someone. Hanging. Like actually hanging from the ceiling fan. I froze and stared, my chest tightening. I crept forward and flipped the light on in a panic. And there was Jake, standing in the middle of the room, just standing. One arm straight up in the air like he was about to grab something. His eyes were closed, face totally blank. I didn't dare touch him, just stood there, half terrified and half confused. After a few seconds, he blinked a couple of times, looked around slowly and muttered, "Oh, right. Forgot to mention, I started sleepwalking at camp." He just walked right past me and back to bed like it was nothing. Meanwhile, I barely slept the rest of the night. When I was in third grade, I went to this summer program run by the local YMCA. You know, one of those weekday day camps where they try to keep kids entertained with games, crafts, and field trips so parents can work without worrying. I actually looked forward to it every morning. Most of my classmates were there too, and it just felt like a giant play date that lasted all day. But what really stuck with me from those years wasn't one of the kids. It was one of the counselors. His name was Matt. Every single morning, like clockwork, he was already at the front table near the check-in spot, shuffling cards or setting up a board game. The second I walked in, he'd give me this big, enthusiastic grin, like he'd been waiting just for me. We'd sit down and play something while the rest of the kids trickled in. I remember thinking how cool it was that someone older wanted to hang out with just me. He always managed to be the counselor in charge of my group too, which I thought was lucky back then. Looking back, it's uncomfortable how close he always stayed, like physically close, and how invested he seemed in me compared to the other kids. But at that age, I just thought I was special. I didn't understand boundaries yet. A couple years went by, and I stopped going to camp. Honestly, I hadn't even thought about Matt in a while. Then one weekend, my mom, my little sister, and I went to this state park about a half hour outside town. Nothing out of the ordinary. We just had a chill day walking some of the trails, playing at the playground, getting muddy. When we got back to the parking lot, I noticed something kind of odd. Our car was surrounded by mostly empty spots, yet there was this one random sedan parked directly next to us. I remember thinking it was a little strange, but shrugged it off. I was more focused on grabbing my juice box and getting in the car. My mom was buckling in my sister when the door of the car next to us suddenly swung open, and, no joke, it was Matt. He stepped out and greeted us casually, like this was all a coincidence. My mom smiled politely and said a quick hello while continuing to get us situated. Then Matt asked if he could take a picture of me. His exact words were something like, "Wow, he's grown up so much. Mind if I snap a few pictures? I just want to remember him." Immediately, my mom's mood shifted. She firmly told him no, shut our car door, locked it, and drove off without another word. I turned back as we were pulling away and saw him still standing there, phone in hand, like he was trying to sneak photos through the window. I didn't know what to make of it at the time, but it stuck with me. I think it was the first time I ever sensed that something about an adult's behavior wasn't just weird, it was wrong. Years later, when I was old enough to put pieces together, my mom told me more. She worked in a mentorship program at the time, the kind that matches kids with adult volunteers. She said Matt's name came up in their system, flagged as a potential mentor. One of her colleagues had even done his intake interview and given him a green light. But my mom immediately recognized him and shut it down. She said she didn't have proof, just a gut feeling that something wasn't right with him. Then one night, we were eating dinner with the news on in the background. They started talking about a guy who got arrested trying to cross into Canada, acting suspicious at the border. They showed his mugshot, and I swear my stomach twisted, because it was Matt. Turns out, border agents found his laptop full of illegal files, videos and images involving kids. Thousands of them. The story said they searched his home afterward and found way more. Stuff he'd downloaded, and even some that he'd made himself. That realization was like a gut punch. I'm convinced that if my mom hadn't picked up on his behavior early, or if we had stayed even a minute longer in that parking lot, things might have gone very differently. The summer after my first year of college, I got hired to work as a counselor at this mid-sized summer camp that sat way out in the woods. It wasn't one of those rowdy party-type jobs either. On the weekends, the place basically emptied out. So unless you were on duty or didn't have plans, it was just you and maybe a couple of others staying on site. I didn't mind it most of the time, but the quiet could get a little weird, especially at night when the place was practically silent. One Friday night in late July, 2 coworkers and I decided to head into town for dinner and a movie. We got back well past midnight, totally exhausted, but glad to be away from the bugs and endless trees for a bit. 2 of us were sleeping in the main lodge that weekend, which was near the front of the camp, while the third girl had her stuff in one of the cabins farther back, like a good half-mile hike through the woods. We tried to talk her into crashing at the lodge for the night since it was so late, but she waved us off, said she actually liked walking at night and needed some alone time. We even offered to drive her to the cabin, but she smiled and said she'd be fine. Before she left, we made her promise to call once she got back, just to be safe. About 15 minutes after she left, we noticed a pair of headlights slowly creeping up the long driveway that led into the camp. At first, we tensed up a bit, but my friend relaxed when she realized it was probably just one of the group leaders for a program coming in the next day. Apparently, there was this one woman who always brought her camper early and had a habit of showing up at bizarre hours. We figured it must be her and went back to tidying up. But then, maybe 10 minutes later, we heard someone trying the front door. Not knocking or calling out, just actually trying to open it. We had already locked everything up as soon as we got back because we were on skeleton crew that weekend, so thankfully it was shut tight. We peeked through the little side window, expecting to see the woman my friend had mentioned, but it was some random man standing there, both hands on the handle, just trying over and over like he belonged there. We cracked open the solid inner door, but kept the screen locked and asked him what he was doing. He told us he was trying to find the Eagles campground. That wasn't unusual. People mixed us up with that spot all the time since it was just a few miles away. We started giving him directions, but halfway through, he cut us off and said, "I can't hear you through the screen, just open the door." Except the screen door wasn't even thick, and we were speaking clearly. He wasn't struggling to hear us. He was just hoping we'd let him in. We told him no, firmly, and said if he didn't leave, we'd call the police. I repeated the directions once more, and he kind of just stood there for a second before finally turning around and heading back toward his vehicle. We watched him from the window, expecting him to turn around and drive off the way he came, but instead, he did the exact opposite. He pulled forward, deeper into the camp. At that point, we both looked at each other, fully alert, and immediately started trying to call the third girl. No answer. We tried her again. Nothing. We called our supervisor's cell too, but it just rang. It hit us then. If this guy had actually come from the direction of the main road, he would have had to pass the Eagles campground before getting to us. So why was he asking where it was? We thought about calling the police right then, but decided to wait a little longer, hoping our friend would call and say she was fine. We kept trying, but never heard from her that night. We never saw the camper leave either. Eventually, sometime after 4 a.m, we must have dozed off sitting near the front windows, kitchen knives in hand, just in case. The next morning, we found out she was okay. She'd gotten to her cabin and gone straight to sleep, totally unaware that any of this had happened. The camper was gone by then, no trace of it on the property. We told a few of the other counselors what happened, and 2 of the guys, who'd been camping out near the entrance to the Eagles site, they weren't technically allowed to drink on camp property, said their tent was set up right by the road. They swore up and down that nobody drove by after midnight. So then the big question became, if that man had come from the direction of Eagles, like he claimed, then how come the guys never saw his camper? And if he didn't come from there, where was he before he showed up trying to get into our lodge? I spent a couple of summers working at this camp tucked into the mountains of northern Georgia. It wasn't religious, really. More like a place for Jewish kids who didn't get to meet a lot of other Jewish kids back home. It drew staff from everywhere. Australia, the UK, Israel, you name it. The camp had this system where staff rotated, who stayed back with the kids at night, which meant if it wasn't your turn, you were free to hit the town for a few hours. That particular night, 5 of us headed out to grab some drinks at one of the usual bars we liked, nothing fancy, just a low-key patio spot we'd been to a bunch of times before. The weather was that sticky kind of southern heat, so we sat outside, sipping beers and decompressing from the day. Just your usual end-of-shift chatter. We were maybe 30 minutes into the night when this guy wandered over to our table. I noticed he had this deep scar down the side of his face, but honestly, I just assumed it was from some past accident. He started chatting us up, said his name, which I don't remember, and invited us to a party he claimed he was hosting nearby. What was weird, though, was how he described it. Something like, "All are welcome, black, white, gay, straight." At first, it sounded like he was trying to be inclusive, but the way he emphasized it felt performative, like he was trying too hard to prove something. Still, we brushed it off. We told him we worked at a camp and couldn't stay out late, and he didn't push it. Eventually, he walked away, and we went back to our drinks. A while later, we wrapped things up and headed out to the lot where we parked. It was quiet out there, one of those rural places where you barely see streetlights, so when we spotted that same guy stepping out from behind a parked truck, we froze. This time, he wasn't alone. A second guy followed behind him, and everything about their body language was different now. Tense, aggressive, hostile. The first guy started cracking his knuckles and took his shirt off like he was trying to intimidate us. That's when we noticed a faded, homemade-looking tattoo across his chest. Something that looked like a Nazi SS symbol. My buddy Kevin instinctively reached for the pocket knife he always carried, not to fight, but as a warning. The guy started yelling, throwing around anti-Jewish slurs, saying stuff like he was going to mess us up. Kevin took a step forward, but we yanked him back, realizing quickly that things were escalating fast. The man told us more of his friends were on their way, and sure enough, within a minute or two, more guys began coming out from around the corner, like they'd been waiting nearby. I couldn't even count them at first. 6, maybe 7. It all turned into a blur. We didn't wait to find out what their plan was. We shoved Kevin into the car with us, and one of us hit the gas while someone else ducked down in the back seat. As we peeled out of there, I heard something smack the side of the car. Rocks. Maybe beer bottles. We didn't slow down until we were halfway back to camp. We never returned to that bar. Not because we were afraid of the town. We loved the place, and the people were, for the most part, good. In fact, when we told the story to a bartender at one of the other spots in town, he poured us around on the house and told us we were always welcome there. After that, we never had another issue for the rest of the summer, but that night definitely stuck with me. There's this memory I haven't thought about in years, and when it came back to me, it hit me in a weird way, like realizing a moment from childhood could have gone very, very wrong. It all started when I was around 9, and I got invited to tag along on a short trip with my friend Max and his family. We were both pretty tight growing up, living just a few houses apart in our little Vermont neighborhood. The town we lived in was quiet, had lots of trees, and kids could basically roam free all summer without anyone worrying too much. Days were spent biking down dirt roads, catching frogs, climbing trees we probably weren't supposed to, and only heading home when it got dark. So, when Max's parents asked if I wanted to come to their lake camp for a few days, I was all in without hesitation. The place was in Massachusetts, somewhere near Leominster, and from the way Max talked about it, it sounded like paradise. Boats, woods, fishing, and not a single homework assignment in sight. My parents knew his family well, so they were totally fine with it, and I was just pumped to be skipping out on chores and sibling drama for a few days. On the way there, packed into their minivan with Max's 2 younger brothers, his mom casually mentioned a girl who lived nearby. Apparently, she wasn't all there mentally and tended to make people uncomfortable. She didn't go into much detail, just said to steer clear if we saw her. I nodded along like I got it, but to be honest, I was only half listening. The camp turned out to be even better than I expected. It was this big wooden house right on the edge of the lake, surrounded by trees with barely another building in sight. It felt completely isolated in the best way. We spent most of the first few days barefoot, either in the water or running through the woods. I remember we found this tiny turtle one day, smaller than my hand, and tried convincing his dad to let us keep it. No luck, obviously, but that's the kind of stuff we were doing, just being kids with no idea that the world could be anything but safe. A few days in, on the last night before we had to head back, Max's uncles grilled up a bunch of fish they'd caught that morning. There were burgers and hot dogs too, and everyone was kind of doing their own thing while the food was cooking. I wandered off toward the edge of the lake with a handful of rocks to skip across the water. The shoreline curved around a bit, and I noticed something, or someone, just past the trees near the edge of the property. At first, I thought it might have been a log or a floating piece of wood, but it was definitely moving toward me. When I stepped closer, I saw it was a canoe, and sitting inside was a girl, maybe a few years older than me, just drifting in the shallow water, watching me. She gave this casual little wave and said, "Hey," like we knew each other. Her voice was calm and friendly, and there was nothing immediately threatening about her. She asked what I was doing and if I wanted to come out in the canoe with her. I remember looking back and realizing that most of the adults had gone inside by then. Nobody could see us from the house. And that earlier warning about the girl nearby, it didn't even cross my mind. I stepped into the water, just a few feet away from the canoe, thinking how cool it would be to paddle around. That's when Max's mom called out from the porch, loud and serious, telling me to come in for dinner right now. She didn't sound angry, but there was a tone in her voice that made me stop in my tracks. I told the girl I had to go and turned around without really thinking about it. By the time I looked back again, she was already paddling away down the shoreline. At the time, I didn't think anything of it. I didn't tell anyone about the girl, and no one asked. But now that I'm older, I've been thinking back to that day and realizing how weird the whole thing was. I have no clue who she was or what she was doing out there completely alone. All I know is, Max's mom called me at the exact right moment, and I don't like imagining what could have happened if she hadn't.